Hey, Carl here to say that Music to Code By is now an app called Music to Flow By. Now you can listen to the tracks on your phone with offline capability. The first 3 tracks are free, and the entire catalog is available by subscription with a new track arriving every month. Just go to musictoflowby.com for all the links. Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
We're here for another hour of good stuff. James Montemagno is here from the Xamarin team at Microsoft, and it's always fun to talk to him. And how are you doing, my Canadian friend?
I have happy news. Happy news.
Oh, happy news.
The youngest daughter has been competitively curling for a number of years. She's now in the women's league.
Wait a minute. Curling. That's a sport, right?
Yeah, that's right. The rocks on ice. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just
the
checking.
Rocks on ice thing.
All right. A lot of people don't know.
So she succeeded. They've gone through to the provincial level. She'll be playing in the women's BC Scotties.
Oh my, that's so great. Way to go, Katie.
So that is the path towards Olympics. Not this Olympics, but after 3 years of building this team, they're starting to win at the provincial level anyway.
That is awesome.
So
congrats.
So suddenly I have to go to Victoria for a week because I'm not missing a bit of the Scotties. I'm going to see those.
Oh, that's a shame, huh?
Yep. It's the way it is. It's what I'm going to do.
That's fantastic news.
Yeah, very excited for her.
I've got a little bit of news. I think I have talked about this before, but I've launched a new podcast with Dr. Jason Fung, a nephrologist from Toronto. And in his clinic there, he treats diabetes with a low-carb diet and fasting. And he's got, over 1,000 patients that he's successfully reversed. And the podcast is called The Obesity Code, named after his best-selling book. And it can be found at obesitycodepodcast.com. So more keto, more stuff like that all the time.
Just a different show, different style.
Totally different. Yeah, it's more like Radiolab style. It's a story.
Huh.
It's based on patients. So the patients tell their stories, and then we have experts chime in with science, and it's good.
It's cool.
All right. Well, let's jump into Better Know a Framework.
All right. What do you got, dude?
Well, this came to me because I wanted to have a phone consultation with somebody for a completely different reason. And they sent me a link to an app online where I can select a day and a time to meet with them from their open schedule and just book it. And I thought it was pretty cool. And I went to look at the site. It's called Calendly.com.
Mm-hmm.
Calendly.com. And essentially you connect it. The easiest thing to do is connect it to your Gmail calendar, but they can connect to a bunch of other things too. And the free level essentially is fully functional for one person.
Nice.
So essentially what you do is you set up what appointment types that you have, like, a 15-minute, a 30-minute, or a 1 hour, or if you want more specific things, for different purposes, whatever. And then you go into your schedule and say what days you're not available, what hours you're not available, your windows of time that you are available every week. And then you just hand out your custom URL to your friends. Whoever, needs to talk to you or wants to schedule an appointment with you, you just send them that link and it just shows up on your calendar.
Nice.
It's just that easy.
That's a cool tool.
It's a very cool tool, and the free level is completely functional. It's not well branded. You have to use their brand, and there's a lot of things that they do for more money, for different plans, such as integrations with Zapier and things like that. But just right out of the box, it works. It's great.
Awesome.
So who's talking to us, buddy?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1411, the one we did with Gil Clearin, talk about Xamarin MVVM apps. We recorded that at NDC London earlier this year.
Yep.
We're still in 2017, but not for much longer. And lots of great comments on this show. And this one comes from Huysen Gregers Lindborch. And I hope I pronounced it correctly, sir. He said, awesome show as usual, guys. I've been working with Xamarin Forms the past year and a half or so, and I've mostly been happy with it, disregarding the occasional initialized component does not exist error. A framework that really helped speed up my workflow is Prism for Xamarin Forms.
Yeah.
Remember the Prism library?
Sure.
Xamarin Forms edition.
Mm-hmm.
It really helps in decoupling your application-specific code from Xamarin code, and thus leads to easier unit testing and a more maintainable code base. Working with Prism, I can do TDD on all my view model code and only have to use an emulator when I test data binding from my views to my view models. Not having to run the full build, deploy, debug cycle to test that my code is set up properly is a benefit to any project, but when the cycle is as long as a Xamarin project, it really helps keeping up your productivity. Which is cool. I did not know that there was a version of Prism for Xamarin Forms. So I will include a link in the show notes if anybody wants to take a look at it. And maybe we'll pester James about it today as well.
That should be cool.
So, Oystein, thank you so much for your comment. A .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of our social media, because we publish every show to Facebook and Google+. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. He's at Rich Campbell. I'm at Carl Franklin. Send us a tweet, because if they pass our unit test suite, we actually read them.
Unit test has characters.
Yeah, that's right.
Pass.
Okay, well, let's bring on James. James Montemagno is a principal program manager on the Xamarin team at Microsoft. He's been a .NET developer since 2005, working in a wide range of industries, including game development, printer software, and web services. Prior to becoming a principal program manager, James was a professional mobile developer and has now been crafting apps since 2011 with Xamarin. In his spare time, he's most likely cycling around Seattle or guzzling gallons of coffee at a local coffee shop. He can be found on Twitter at James Montemagno. He blogs code regularly on his personal blog at Motzcode, E-S. I got to spell that. I don't even know Motzcode, but it's Motzcode.es. And on the weekly development podcast, Merge Conflict, which you can find at mergeconflict.fm or wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome, James.
Hey, thanks for having me. It is an honor and a privilege once again. Number three, I think, to be on. I think so.
At least.
Something like that. You went on tour with us, for crying out loud.
That's true.
I know. Jeez.
That is not for the weak.
Yeah. I couldn't get enough of you guys, so I just kind of kept going, and I'm really honored to be back. It's been, I think, a whole year since I've been on, and so much has happened. It's been really crazy.
A little over a year.
Yeah, it's been crazy.
This will be show number 5.
Well, the honor is ours, James. I mean, we always like talking to you anyway, but you're the guy with the latest poop on Xamarin. You know, you've got the stuff. That's your job, is to tell us what's new.
I like to think that when I'm not talking about Xamarin, I'm talking about Xamarin, because it's like between coming on podcasts, doing Merge Conflict, and then I have a show on Channel 9 now called The Xamarin Show, which I was really creative with that title. It's literally a show about Xamarin. I just can't shut up about talking about how much I love it. And, you know, I've been doing it almost for 7 years at this point, and I literally just did a hackathon with a bunch of nonprofits building all these beautiful open source applications with Xamarin. And it was really cool to see 70 people come together and crush a bunch of code and see like 8 apps really help these nonprofits. And because we were able to do it all with XAML, C# and Visual Studio. So, you know, I like those stories of why I fell in love with it, why I keep falling in love with it, and seeing other developers find mobile development for the first time, even though, you know, mobile development's been around for a while now, but it's still new to a lot of people, and it's really exciting.
What I like about Xamarin these days is that every time you guys rev, the startup time, you know, gets easier and easier and takes less and less time. In the earlier days, you know, let's not kid ourselves. In the early days, it was kind of painful because there wasn't a lot of, installer help. There was, but there was a lot of manual steps that you needed to do. And when you guys merged with Microsoft, and Microsoft bought Xamarin, it got easier. And it seems like every rev, it just is more and more effortless to get up and running with the Xamarin project. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think it's a big effort here at Microsoft to make Visual Studio a really enjoyable experience. That's one thing. I think I came on the podcast last time and I said, one thing that's going to change between Xamarin and Xamarin inside of Microsoft is we're going to become closer than possibly ever with the Visual Studio team and work really hard with the teams that are working on Mac products.
Yeah.
And what's interesting there is with Visual Studio 2017, it actually gets revved a lot. I mean, I just updated it last night and then updated again probably next week. But, what's cool about that is you can really tell that the Visual Studio team wants it to boot as fast as humanly possible. I mean, I think every single release you've seen that. And the latest one, 15.5, is like lightning fast. And then we're really trying to adopt some of the new structural patterns. This is what you'll see with the new CS Proj, with integrating NuGets better, and with integrating file new, essentially, and actually getting up and running. So what's cool with the latest one is everything uses new packages and .NET standards. So if you go in and say, I want a new Xamarin Forms app, it will create that project in under like 5 seconds. So it doesn't have to wait to download all your NuGets and download all of the Google stuff. We've hidden like a lot of people don't know, we hide so much stuff from you. We've figured out how to go into the Android support libraries and grab just the little tiny bits that we need. So we don't download a gig of Android stuff anymore. We download kilobytes for only the stuff you need. So
wow,
it's beyond cool.
Yeah. And we've then, of course, talking about those dependencies of a developer just wants to write a mobile app. Why do they got to wait hours upon hours? We've actually reduced our installation in the last 6 months by 60%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty impressive.
So just cutting back the footprint, like it's just not as much installation as it used to be.
Yeah, we stripped out anything that was inessential. Sometimes, when a product's around for a long time, it grows, it gets bigger, and well, it works, right? But just because it works doesn't mean it's the best. So we went back and we said, how do we make this not only just a better experience on the day-to-day, so we can strip out some stuff, but let's make sure that when we strip out stuff, we're improving the quality as well. So I think that's why you see those things, Carl, you're saying is just like, well, it seems to not only install faster, but getting started faster, and everything is a more enjoyable experience. And that's what everybody wants. And our goal really is that if you are, let's say, an ASP.NET developer and you want to try Xamarin, you should have a new minimal installation. And this is something that we're really, really close on. It actually works today for iOS, which is you can go in and say, check Xamarin for mobile.NET and uncheck all of the dependencies. So I don't want Java. I don't want Android SDKs. I don't want anything. Just give me the root of it. And then you're thinking, well, if you don't have any SDKs or emulators, how does it work? Well, we have a brand new Xamarin Live Player, which has been one of my passion projects over the last year that I've been the program manager on, which is an app that you download from your phone, works with Xamarin Forms app and Xamarin iOS code behind UI applications. You take your iPhone, you pair it with Visual Studio, and we send all of your source code files over to the device. And we then interpret your source code on the device and have a debugger that's running inside of that application. So we're running your app inside of our app.
Now, last time you came on the show, you talked about that, but you had just released it. And then you showed it at Dev Intersection. We saw it there on stage, and in a couple other places too, you showed it. So it's gotten obviously a lot better since the first time I tried it, which was like right when it was released. I like it because I don't know what kind of magic you're doing, maybe some Signal R or something like that, but the interaction between your code and the device is instant.
Yeah, our goal with the Xamarin Live Player was not to solve everybody's problem with mobile development, because at some time you do have to just compile your app. You're going to have to do it.
Right.
But we really focused first. Our first priority was on getting started, because a lot of people try to get started with mobile development in any facet, whether it's with Xamarin or with Android Studio or whatever. And they're just like, oh, this is such a big insult, so complicated, because developing for one platform is complicated. Now you're developing for 3 or 4.
Right.
So what we did is actually a lot of great magic that I can't go into, but you can thank Frank Kruger for this. But the app that we built, the Xamarin Live Player, essentially talks remotely over your local Wi-Fi to your Visual Studio or Visual Studio for Mac. And what's cool is that we were essentially just watching your buffer inside of Visual Studio for any code changes. So there's kind of 2 modes. There's the live run, which is my favorite mode. So you just say live run this view. and it just sends that single view over. And as you modify your XAML or your code behind, it updates the screen in real time. And what's important there is that it's actually updating and running your C# code, like your business logic. It's not just XAML visualization. It's actually running your source code because we're interpreting it. And then
but let's back up a bit, because even if you were just interpreting the XAML, that in and of itself would be really, really valuable, because what's the first thing people want to see? They want to see their screens.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that they work. They want to make sure they look good on the device. And what we're used to are clunky emulators that take a long time to boot up, or you have to switch around or make some magic happen.
Yeah.
What we really want is just to look down on our phone and say, yeah, that looks good. Let's move on from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly why we created it. And we have a brand new getting started experience for people that want to see that, right? Which is, hey, I download this little sample application. I don't have to configure anything. I just download this app from the App Store, and boom, within 5 minutes, that's the goal. 5 minutes, have an app running on your device. And then, just cool. Changing it. It's super rad. I mean, the first time I remember pitching this idea and saying, like, this is what we need to Joseph, and getting it all together, and seeing developers use it in a lot of different ways has helped evolve the product too. So one thing that I demoed at Connect this year, so since we're still in 2017, and happy holidays to everybody too, by the way, was we integrated even deeper into Visual Studio. So let's say you have one file open of XAML. This is your item list. Well, that's cool. But what if you have like 6 or 7 different XAML files open? What if you just switch to the different XAML file, and then immediately that XAML file, without you having to do anything, was visualized? So we made it so Visual Studio is not only looking for code changes, but also looking to see what is your active frame of reference. Like, what are you currently modifying? And it'll switch between any of the views for you in real time, which is bananas.
On the device.
On the device.
Absolutely bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I hang more than one device at once, or is it one device at a time?
So right now it's one device at a time. It's any iOS or Android device. And you just toggle back and through, and you can pair as many of those devices as you want to Visual Studio or Visual Studio for Mac. And you just boom, 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 boom,
so
and toggle.
What that means is that, okay, you pair both of them and you switch when you got it looking good on your iPhone, then you switch to your Android, and your Android is connected and working.
Yeah, exactly.
You just make a switch, and instantaneously you're looking at it on the other device, right?
Yeah, right now in front of me, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, is I have, like your Lyft drivers, they have like those iPhone mounts, essentially, like in their cars. I have those in between my monitors for both an iOS and Android device, and it's just there with the live player always powered, just kind of ready for me to go. So I can just have both the live player up on both, and I just toggle. And then I have my iPad too, because I think that's what developers are going for. They're like, oh, it's cool that it works on this device, but what about my iPad? What about this Android tablet, right? And you can get this application absolutely everywhere. So it's a great getting started tool, and we're trying to make it work with more things. As apps grow and get more complex, we're kind of realizing that it's hard to interpret everything. So we're doing as much as we can. But our goal with the live player was to get you up and running, get your first week, second week out of the way, and use it here and there where it fits your projects or custom controls. And then at some point when I'm like 6 months into a project, well, I need to be testing every little thing on the device, and then I'm going to have the whole setup, So eventually you're going to do it, but it's really that getting started, those instant code changes. And trust me, we're working as hard as we can to interpret the world, as we like to say.
Yeah. So there's always limitations. What things can't you do with the live player that you have to compile for?
Yeah, so right now it works. It's really optimized for Xamarin Forms, just because we control that XAML and we control that workflow. But it also works really great for just iOS applications where developers are not using storyboards and they're just using coded UI, which actually is about 60 or 70% of people. A lot of people just don't use storyboards at all.
Wow.
That works really well. It does not work at all with Android non-Xamarin Forms applications. So since we control the user interface in Android, we can control that experience. But Android apps are very complex. It's my favorite, most complex platform in the world. But a lot of things happen at build time, so we can't control that. And then besides that, so those are the core platforms. And I think a lot of our developers are using forms. So that's probably what they'll care about. Right now, the limitations, since we don't compile anything, that's an important thing to remember. We do not compile anything. So that's why we're able to get it running on your device in just a few seconds instead of waiting for a full build. Some things such as like AutoMapper or Fody or these kind of build time, like refit, things that are looking at attributes and compiling code for you automatically. We don't compile your code, so it doesn't really work.
But native code works?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You can go and create a custom control. You can access iOS, Android APIs. You can pull down NuGets.
Wow.
JSON.net, make RESTful service calls, and how I do it. People ask me how I use it is I usually have a mock data store. So when I'm interacting with the Xamarin Live Player, I never have to make a web request, right? I just return dummy data so my application can load it. And that's usually what we recommend. Yeah.
That's cool. Hey, hold that thought right there, James, while we take a moment for this very important message. Hey, Rockheads, this is Carl. Have you tried JetBrains Rider? It's a new cross-platform .NET IDE that's light yet powerful and comes from the makers of ReSharper, IntelliJ, IDEA, and WebStorm. You can write .NET code on Windows, Mac, or Linux. Rider has you covered. Rider helps you develop ASP.NET, .NET Core, .NET Framework, Xamarin, and Unity applications. Most languages used in .NET development are supported, from C#, VB.NET, F#, and XAML to ASP.NET Razor syntax, JavaScript, TypeScript, and all that other front-end stuff. It comes with navigation, thousands of code inspections, refactorings, unit testing, debugging, rich coding assistance, and more advanced IDE features, powered by proven technology from ReSharper and WebStorm. Download Rider now and take it for a 30-day trial at rider.dotnetrocks.com. That's rider.dotnetrocks.com. And you're listening to .NET Rocks. We're back. This is Carl Franklin, Richard Campbell, and James Montemagno is here from the Xamarin team talking about the Live Player. And have we covered everything with the Live Player?
The only other question I would have here is, are we still struggling to build a good XAML designer? Is it just that hard? Maybe it is. Maybe we were just spoiled by WinForms, that we've never been able to come as close with XAML as we've gotten with WinForms to just drag, drop, build a UI.
Yeah, I think that it's really difficult not only just to build a designer, but a good cross-platform designer.
Yes. We're asking for a hard problem.
Yeah.
No question about it.
I think it's impossible, actually, because Windows Forms is so restricted and so constrained by what it can show and how it can show that we don't have those constraints with XAML. And so, therefore, you have pixel-level control of stuff that you don't have with Windows Forms.
Yeah, maybe have me back on another year and we'll see where we're at.
Oh, are you hinting at something there?
Oh, listen to this guy.
Montemagno.
Yeah.
One could speculate. Wow, that's encouraging. Okay.
I mean, I don't want to say no to anything, but I think one thing that we have always done at Xamarin and at Microsoft is listen to our developers and create the world's best developer tools for every single platform. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And we're going to listen to everyone. And
that's great.
You have my Twitter account, James Montemagno. You can spam me all day with those designer requests. And it helps. I can show, here's 1,000 tweets. Let's make this happen,
That's awesome. So one thing I really got to tell you I love is using Visual Studio for the Mac to build Mac desktop applications. I actually did it. And I went through the tutorials and let me tell you something. I was really happy about that. It's probably a real edge case. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to use, Xamarin Forms to build Mac apps, but I thought that was an insurmountable problem, and now I can see the way forward to doing it.
Oh, yeah. There was, I'll tell you this much. So talking about Xamarin Forms itself, there's been huge releases, especially over the last year, but in the last few months. And with 2.5, which was the most recent release, and we're always revving, that brought tons of goodies, and it did bring out the official Mac OS support. And we've made a lot of optimizations there. And I'll say, I was with you. I was never going to make a Mac application because they're really complex. Yeah. It's hard, and there's menus, and there's all these things. But I've also been going down the route of making them.
Not only that, but I'm a Windows developer. I don't know what from Mac,
Yeah.
I don't know the Mac development model, and I didn't really feel like learning it. I just wanted to take what I know, modify it a little bit, and, then that's it.
I think that there's a real untapped market, and I think that's one thing that Xamarin Forms is doing really well. We wanted it to be the cross-platform library for every single operating system, and we always targeted, phone and tablet first, but obviously UWP, which goes everywhere. We're now on Mac OS. We've worked with the community to pull in a WPF flavor into the mix here, which is really cool.
Awesome.
Because, hey, not everyone has Windows 10. Go figure. So you got to run those apps everywhere. We have a Linux backend as well. So you can run GTK Sharp applications on Linux. I'm not a Linux person, so I'm never going to do that, but that's really cool. We worked with Samsung to bring Xamarin Forms and .NET Core to Samsung Tizen devices, which is pretty bananas. And then my good friend Frank Kruger, he built a library called UI, which runs Xamarin Forms inside of an ASP.NET application on the web.
Wow. That's so cool. We need a link to that.
Yeah, we do.
So this is my new favorite, just talking about Xamarin Forms, of it being open source. And I'm going to go ahead and drop a link definitely for you guys in the show notes. But what's really cool is, since Xamarin Forms is open source, people can do anything with it. So Frank had this idea, which is, I really just want to run my XAML everywhere like it was promised and what we want to do with it. And he was working on IoT devices. And he was like, man, I know I could run IoT Core, but, this thing has a Linux backend and all this stuff. And he goes, I really just want a button, essentially inside of here. And he first started with a button, and then it grew into images and date times and a full layout system. And he ported a bug sweeper application, which is one of our very complex applications, which is kind of like Minesweeper, essentially, which is running now inside of an ASP.NET Core application. And it totally works. It loads resources. It does timing. It does everything that you would imagine under the sun. So to me, what's cool is that now you have a real, true cross-platform XAML that runs everywhere. And this is what I've waited for, because I'm not a web developer. I can throw together something that's terrible looking, but I'd rather throw something together that I understand, that I can control, which is XAML, and that'll help me build CRUD type applications. I think that's a big struggle for people, or just something simple. And in fact, I was building a new data caching library that I call Monkey Cache. And I was like, oh, I wonder if this works on ASP.NET, because it's a .NET standard library. So I brought in UI, and within 5 minutes, I had a Xamarin Forms app running on the web testing my .NET standard library, and it was mind-blowing.
Did you guys say something? I'm playing Bug Sweeper. Sorry.
Yeah. So
that is amazing.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And this is why you have me on the podcast, is to tell you about this awesome stuff.
You better believe it. This is amazing.
Yeah.
I still haven't found a bug, though. I'm still clicking around.
It's really cool, and it's responsive, and it works just like you would think Xamarin Forms works. You create some XAML and you load that into a controller, essentially in ASP.NET, and boom, you're good to go. And the same thing with Mac, right? It's you add another head onto your project. So now I want a Mac app. Now I want a Tizen app. Now I want an ASP.NET Core application. They're all right there, which is really cool. And I mean, that's just things that are building out of the Xamarin Forms ecosystem, because you still have just Xamarin Forms itself with bringing in fast renderers and layout compression and optimizing the startup time of the applications and listening to users. And there's tons of things that we're doing inside of Xamarin Forms to optimize for each platform, to make sure that the performance is really great, and that the API is great for everybody. I mean, in fact, we had a big thing with the iPhone X. I'm going to call it the iPhone X forever. I don't care what anyone else tells me, but it's a big X. I'm just saying. Xbox One X, Mac OS X. I'm just saying. And so the iPhone X has all these really weird constraints. And within a week, the Xamarin Forms team integrated iPhone X optimizations into Xamarin Forms. So you have control, so that way you can optimize for big header views and all these different iOS 11 and iPhone X optimizations. So it's really cool to see not only the ecosystem around Xamarin Forms evolve, but the actual framework itself. Just like you were saying, Carl, with Mac. Like, I would never imagine 6 years ago I was building Mac applications. Now I am, and I'm doing it in XAML, you know? So
yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, and it sort of begs this idea of, are we headed towards a universal dev platform through the Xamarin approach, that bit by bit, it seems like you're finding ways to plug into every way we currently build apps.
Yeah, I think that one thing that was important that we did at Connect is we try to make sure that, you know, if you're building, you know, a lot of people ask, like, well, why should I just build an iOS app, or should I just build a UWP app? And I said, if you're building a UWP app and like that's your core platform, and you need to take every single optimization and you're doing all this crazy stuff because it's going to be the world's best, you know, UWP application or the world's most optimized crazy thing over here, like, you know, you can definitely go down that route, but structure your code in an MVVM way that you could bring over another Xamarin, you know, Forms or iOS or Android head. And we also announced the next evolution of XAML standard, which I talked very briefly about at the keynote at Connect, which is we have worked with the community, because one of the struggles developers have, and even looking at the show notes from the previous time I was on and a few other people, and they said, I love Xamarin Forms, I love this and this. I'm like, what's this stack layout thing? Where's my, this thing? And what's, you know, grid looks the same, but what's a label? What's an entry? These don't make any sense. So what we did is we went back and forth on XAML standard, and originally it was a specification for different platforms to opt in.
Right.
And what we decided was, listen, there's no way to really align everything one-to-one, because if you're doing that world's next greatest HoloLens UWP application, you're really going to have to take advantage of every single little thing on that platform.
Sure.
But what we can do is we can work with all of the XAML teams, and we can say, let's at least try to align things when we're creating new APIs, and let's see if we can build some kind of backwards compatibility layer. So what we did for Xamarin Forms is we created a new NuGet package that I think we're going to integrate later on into the actual thing, but we wanted some feedback. So we said, hey, we're creating this alias package. And what this alias package does is it will alias any of the Xamarin Forms specific controls or properties to your UWP, WPF names and property names. Yeah.
It's a mapper.
It's an auto mapper.
Well, hang on one second and hold that thought. I want to talk more about this. But first, hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is?
It must be that happy time again.
Yeah. It's time to get my ooh-wee on, baby. Ooh-wee.
Really?
Yeah, I'm excited by that, but all right. It's actually time to give away a DXperience subscription to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. Become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries, and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today, and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best without limits or compromise. And check out their DevExtreme React Grid, built from the ground up to fully support all the cool features that come with React, like virtual DOM and state controllers like Redux. It supports master detail, sorting, grouping, paging, and editing. You can check it out and test it for free on GitHub. But learn more and download your free 30-day trial of DevExpress Universal at devexpress.com/superhero.
Well, all right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner is Jeff Garrison.
Congratulations, Jeff.
Yay!
Golf clap for you, sir.
And Jeff just won the D-Experience subscription, a big pile of awesome from our friends at DevExpress, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you don't know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world, and every show we like to give away stuff from our sponsors. And every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree. And yes, you missed it. Or maybe you didn't. I don't know.
It happened. Where were you?
It did happen. Where were you? We also like to ask our guests, James, if you had $5,000 to spend on technology right now, what would you buy?
That's a good question. And I think I went back to what I said previously because I was always trying to figure this out. I think originally it was like a home entertainment system, and then it was a VR setup. And I'll tell you this time, I'm going real developer-y. And I've been really into DevOps and continuous integration and delivery and things like that for mobile applications in my backend. So I've been using VSTS a whole lot. I've been building custom tasks and stuff. And one thing that I love is that you can do it in the cloud, but why do I got to wait for a cloud server to spin up? I want build servers in my house. So I thought about this all weekend about what I would do with $5,000. And I would build like an awesome at-home like data center for myself, and like those little Intel NUCs, like a Linux machine, like a little Mac Mini, but like all souped up, right? So anything can go and talk to them. And I think I could spend about $5,000 on networking and having, maybe 6 of those, like total, 2 Macs, 2 little Windows machines, 2 little Linux machines. I could literally build anything in my little server rack that's just sitting underneath my desk. And I think that would solve all of my problems as I'm building all these libraries and apps, and everything would be so fast. And that would be my goal.
You'd introduce a whole new set of problems to your life.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I have to keep all this gear running. What the hell is broken now? It's asking me to talk to my administrator. Wait, I'm the administrator and I don't know what to do.
That's true.
That's the anti-cloud, James.
I know.
Do you realize everybody's going toward the cloud?
I love, don't get me wrong, I love the hosted solutions and I use them often, but I also like to really control what's on my machine, because what happens if those update and I'm not ready to update, or we broke something? Like, I want to control it. And maybe that's been doing Xamarin development for 7 years, where I'm only ready to upgrade when I'm ready to upgrade. But
right.
I don't know.
I'm just amazed because I know you're a bike guy. Like, you can drop $5,000 on a bike in a heartbeat. Go get yourself a Stradale. Boom.
Well, I've already done that, so that's the problem. So,
how did I know?
You know me all too well.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, it's very funny to hear you wanting on-premise hardware, because I've been running a rack out of the basement for many years, and I'm finally migrating more and more of that workload to the cloud.
Yeah, it's important to say that I don't ever want to run servers in my house. That would be a terrible idea. Yes. I just want build servers to build my code.
Nobody does that. Okay, we got to dive back into this XAML standard thing, because I think it's a bigger deal than people realize. It's just that it seems to me like .NET standard went so well. Like, once we got to 2.0, everything's kind of fine. And I think XAML standard has a long way to go. People just don't understand what the problem is.
Yeah. So I think that we also have a problem that we just wanted to throw core and standard onto everything. Right. Because people like that. So just throw standard and core. This is core, that is core. And I think it's really easy. .NET Core is a runtime. It's a .NET runtime, right? It's, where you're running ASP.NET and .NET Core apps. We still have our mono runtime. There's a .NET runtime. And then .NET Standard says, hey, there's all these different runtimes and there's different flavors of .NET available on them. Let's give developers a single API with all of these amazing .NET APIs that can run on any of those platforms. So it doesn't matter if it's Xamarin, Mono, .NET Core, .NET Framework, UWP, doesn't matter. It just runs there.
What I like about this is that it's distributed, right? That rather than having like an architectural guardian that everybody has to build through, that you have a standard that everybody's agreed to.
Yeah.
So that as many teams as want to build to the standard can build to the standard. It does scale, but it's distributed.
Right.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. What XAML standard attempts to fix is saying that, hey, there's all of these either major or minor tweaks to different flavors of XAML because, Silverlight XAML is a little bit different than WPF XAML, which is a little bit different than UWP XAML, and Xamarin Forms XAML. Some things are the same, some things are different.
Yeah.
So there's two challenges.
I presume that Silverlight is not in consideration.
No.
So there's really three flavors of XAML we care about. And I didn't even know that people recognize that there's three. That the Windows 10 XAML, the UWP XAML, and the WPF XAML are two different teams with two different flavors. And Xamarin Forms comes at this from a totally different approach.
Yeah.
Right.
Xamarin Forms, when it was created, tried to say, hey, we kind of created these names and these properties based off the mobile version of them. So that's why a lot of them are iOS or Android specific. So Xamarin developers are like, I already know these controls and activity indicator. That makes sense to me.
Right.
There's two problems though. One is anyone new to the platform that happens to be a WPF or UWP developer has to then relearn a new language. It's just like, hey, you knew Spanish, go learn simplified Chinese, right? Like, you simplified Chinese, go learn traditional Chinese. Like, it's maybe that there's different extremes there of the language barrier. And then there is the other part is I would go on to Stack Overflow. I see this really cool XAML snippet, and I try to put it in an app, right? But the XAML is different. It's a different schema. So how do I, make my XAML? I can make my .NET code go everywhere. How do I make my XAML code go across project types, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the goal.
Well, I also think the UWP XAML and the WPF XAML are not that far apart.
No, they're not.
But they are both very Windows-centric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Xamarin Forms, which is the outlier, seems to be the broader thinker about a larger number of devices, a larger superset of what is possible. And I don't know how you move those two teams. Those are big teams.
Yeah.
They're big old teams to agree to something far enough abstract to actually include everything that Xamarin's going to embrace. And the sort of choice here that is, does Xamarin cut off one of its limbs, maybe two of its limbs, and not be as cross-platform as it's been to be compliant with the standard just because it has gravity around Windows?
Yeah, it's I like to joke that Xamarin Forms now supports more operating systems than Xamarin supports, because it supports all of Windows, all the old WinPhone stuff, Linux, Mac OS, Tizen, ASP.NET, right? It supports everything. And I think the challenge is really hard. I think that's why there has been movement, but you're not seeing momentous shifts. You were listening. We're trying to figure things out. And you're right. It takes changes. It takes teams coming together to decide. And what we have done is we try to work as close as we possibly can with the Windows team and the WPF team to say, what's the right route to go? What's going to not only make it a better API for developers, but how are we not going to break everyone? That's the number one. Right. How do we not break everyone? So our original thought here is this alignment package to say, hey, it's a lot easier for us to change our XAML schema and change a bunch of things if we can, to see, does this work? Like, does this approach work for everyone? Yes or no? And we can integrate them together.
So this is not just a renaming problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not just a renaming problem. It's not just a renaming problem because there's all these controls, there's all these other things. So you're going to see some evolution and some things that we're going to be able to do to say, what happens when someone puts in some bad XAML? Like, can we detect that? Are we smart enough? We're Microsoft. Of course we're smart. Like, we're smart. There's so many smart people that work here to actually optimize a lot of stuff for you. So I hope over time, as things progress, we'll see everything really align and developers hopefully just don't have to think about it. But I think you're right. We're still a ways off. But we did make a step, and I think that was important. So if people today are like, oh man, I just can't change my mind over to these new names and everything, well, go download that NuGet package and you'll have all your names that you want and give that a try.
And I'm poking around in the XAML standard doc on GitHub here, and I see as of November this year, an update to the phase 1 alignment. So this seems to me like the easy list of here's the stuff that's not that hard to align.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal, I would say, in the beginning. And it's a preview, which was, what's the quick win that we can try this out without having to change the world? So you can just go in and you can say, here's my stack panel, and boom, right? You're kind of good to go.
I wonder if you guys are going to be able to get to an 80% case so that you can really pour energy into the 20% case. Like that get down to what's hard.
Yeah.
But first, have some wins, put some stuff behind you so that you don't throw this away. Because I think it's a good goal, but I do not envy the people on this team. This is a stunningly hard problem.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah.
But I'm just glad that we're working on it, and hopefully developers have given good feedback so far, and I think that we'll continue to make some good changes to it. Yeah, I'm real excited about it.
And I like that you're doing it in public so that we all get to see and participate. You know, that's the upside to it being here. You go back and you look at the notes, you look at the conversations that are going on. Like, there are a lot of people engaged on how are we going to do this right.
Yeah, it's definitely one thing that I love about Microsoft, of not only just developing C# in the open, a lot of our libraries in the open, all of Xamarin in the open. It really allows not only just great conversation, but so much collaboration. It's super fun.
Hey, can we talk Tizen for a minute?
Sure, if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, so Tizen, if for those who don't know, is this OS that Samsung brought out. It's based on the Linux kernel. I think it came out in 2012, but it's on a few of their smartphones and tablets, but also the devices that it covers and that run this thing are like in-vehicle infotainment things, smart TVs, smart cameras, wearable computing, Blu-ray players, printers, smart home appliances like refrigerators, lighting, washing machines, air conditioners, appliances. I think like one of the Roombas or something runs it. I don't know, a robotic vacuum cleaner. But so there's obviously a lot of opportunity there in terms of companies that have hardware that want to make software for it. Is that really what Tizen is for hardware companies?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. So Tizen is Samsung's operating system. It's been around for a long time, since 2012, I believe. So about 5 years now. And one thing that's important to know about it is in the latest version, they really wanted to go cross-platform, and they were running their own like web HTML5 approach to it, and it wasn't working so good. So they moved and they brought .NET Core as their main runtime actually on the devices that they're running. So your televisions, your watches are running .NET Core, which is super cool because now you can use .NET Standard and you can share code. But they had their own user interface, of course. So the problem there was that how do we create cross-platform UI? And they said, well, Microsoft and Xamarin, they have a cross-platform UI. It's called Xamarin Forms. So they implemented all of their controls having a Xamarin Forms top to it. So when you create a list view, it's a list view, and a button is a button. And they created the renderers for them, which is cool. Now, these run on about 50 million different devices. And you're right, they're anywhere from dishwashers to toasters to watches to smartphones to televisions, I think is a huge one. And what's cool is that you just download the Tizen extension into Visual Studio. Tizen projects light up. You can add .NET Standard projects. You can write your C#.NET code, and you write a Xamarin Forms XAML user interface, and you're creating Tizen applications. So to me, it's more of what is my business needs, right? Like, where am I running? What's the potential there? So I think that's a really important thing that I've always said about Xamarin is it's not just iOS and Android, right? It's literally the possibility of going to every single operating system out there. And I think that's what's kind of cool about Tizen is not only is it yet another platform, but it's really cool to see this third party company, right? I mean, it's not Microsoft, it is Samsung, which is this giant in the industry. And they're like, hey, that .NET Core thing, that's really good. That Xamarin Forms thing, that's really cool. And then, oh my goodness, the Tizen team is actually amazing. Like, they did all this work. Like, it was all them. And then they said, man, I really want more adoption. What can I do? So I told them, I said, what would be really great is we have all these plugins for Xamarin and Windows. Right. And if you could just, I don't know, contribute to all those, that would be great. So actually, in the last few months, every single one of my GitHub projects, the Tizen team has come in and added Tizen support for me. It's been it's cool. Really cool. Awesome. They're really about it.
I also like this case. It's proof that somebody else can come into this ecosystem and become a full member.
Yeah.
That their product can work alongside everybody else's product. Like that, just like that proof point. So it's super easy for the founding members to all get along.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to point out, though, before we get off this topic, that it's not like you can pull up your smart TV and download an app that you wrote and run it on your smart TV. I mean, it's very hardware dependent, and a lot of these devices are specific, from their manufacturers to what software they run. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think it's really important that if you're an appliance developer or, somebody in that business, this is a good way for you to leverage all of that good stuff that's been out there. It's not necessarily that you're going to write an app that somebody with a smartwatch is going to be able to download, let's say.
Yeah, it's kind of like Windows embedded of the past or still is, and then you have Android things of these IoT devices. So it's yet another platform based on what you're building, which I think is good. Do you want to run Windows on it? Do you want to run Tizen on it? But the idea and the dream is like, hey, I can still run my .NET code on all of these things regardless of the OS. And that's what's important.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, let's talk .NET embedding. This is what everybody's been waiting for. What is this thing, James?
All right, so this was my major announcement. This was my one more thing at Connect 2017. And I had the honor of working with the team on this and announcing it, which was, I love Xamarin. That's pretty clear. And I love C# and XAML and everything that we've done. And I've been doing so over 7 years. However, you can think of mobile applications today starting to become legacy, right? It's been 7-8 years. You have legacy applications. You have companies and developers that have investments in existing code bases, or they're just, stubborn and don't want to move over to anything cross-platform, and they want to stay with their Java and their Swift or Objective-C code bases. Now, that's fine. However, there's never been a way of sharing code between your Mac, your iOS, and your Android application if they're written in different languages. Because if you're using Xamarin, everything's good. But if you're not using Xamarin, it's not good. So what we decided is that we want to give these businesses and developers a way to start sharing their C# and .NET business logic in existing Objective-C, Swift, and Java applications. So we created .NET embedding, which enables any developer to create a .NET library, run it through our .NET embedding tooling, and it will generate for you a native iOS, Mac, or Android framework or jar file for you that will execute everything natively.
Oh, man.
Did you really call it the Embeddinator 4000? I'm looking on GitHub.
So the official name of the product is .NET Embedding, but the name of the tooling is the Embeddinator 4000. That is correct. And it describes what it does to the point. It embeds .NET. It's the Embeddinator.
Yeah. So is it actually taking pieces of the framework and compiling it into this code flipped over to native so that it stands alone?
Yeah, so think of it like this. We've been doing the reverse for 10 years. We've been taking Objective-C and Java and bringing it to C#. So we brought C# the reverse. So we bundle in our tiny little .NET runtime into this framework that can execute all of your .NET code. And what we do is we expose a perfect Java or Objective-C or Swift API for you. Because again, we've been doing the reverse for 10 years.
Right. Sure. And you said C#, but you really mean IL, right? I should be able to take any .NET language to do this.
That is correct. It's just IL. That is correct. Yeah,
VB.
You're correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what's nice about this is that it's for teams that have been trying to do this. Their only other options were to use some JavaScript framework like a React Native or Qt and use a bunch of C++. And no one wants to write tons of some C++ over and over and over again. That's yet another challenge for developers to learn and maintain. So, well, I do love C++, don't get me wrong, but it's a bigger paradigm shift, I would say. I think that's the one thing I want to get to.
I guess interop would be the closest thing that we have to it in the managed world, right?
Yeah.
But this isn't an interop layer. This is recompiling code, isn't it?
It's recompiling code down into the native platform and framework and exposing that API, and we handle anything for you. Now, what's really cool on top of that is that today you can start with your business logic, which a lot of people are like, hey, if I can just share 10% of code, like that would blow my mind. Like if I could just share my models, mind blown. But we said, well, what if you could just share not only your business logic, but what if you could share some user interface? I mean, we have a cross-platform user interface. So what we did is there's been a big shift inside of Xamarin Forms to create this new feature that we renamed. It used to be called Xamarin Forms Embedding, but now it's called Xamarin Forms Native Forms, which is the ability to take any Xamarin Forms XAML page and convert it into a Android fragment or iOS UI view controller inside of your Xamarin application. So what we did is we said, hey, what if we take that Xamarin Forms Native Forms capability and expose that with .NET embedding? So to summarize, what this means is you can go in and create shared business logic and user interface, run it through the .NET embedding tooling, and then pull that iOS and Android, now Java and Objective-C library into your native language applications. And it will not only share the user interface code, but also your business logic. And it'll work and be native because it is native, because it's powered by Xamarin, which is native, So it's pretty bananas. And I have a great blog post walking through how to create a little, to-do clicker button that increases a count. And I got this up and running in like 30 minutes to get it into my iOS and Android app, which is pretty awesome.
Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah. It's something that I have always wanted to do. And I think, at Xamarin, it didn't make tons of sense to do this. But now it's like, hey, our goal is not just to make Xamarin the best platform in the entire world to build mobile apps, but to bring C# and .NET absolutely everywhere. And we are. I mean, what do we just talk about? We have .NET running and XAML running on ASP.NET and Tizen devices and inside of an Objective-C app, right? Like, how cool is that? Right. How cool is it to be a .NET developer? I don't know. It's bananas.
It's very cool. It's very cool. Hey, man, one other thing before we go. I'm digging the beard, man.
Oh, thank you.
It looks good, baby.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've been trying real hard. Yeah.
Seattle, coffee, beard, and bike. You're full hipster.
Absolutely.
It's very true.
Do you use wax on it?
I do. I have some beard oil.
I knew it.
Of course.
I knew it. All right, James.
Yeah. You got to keep it. Got to keep it nice and moisturized, and
you do. Otherwise, fluffy stuff comes off of it.
Exactly.
Well, anyway, you wouldn't want that. James, man, this has been a bombshell show. Thank you very much. It's always great to talk to you for many, many reasons, but none the least of which, you always have cool new stuff to share. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Honor and a privilege yet again. Thank you so much.
All right. And we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time. Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm